The alien queen demanded. "Who guards you so fiercely?" The princess answered, "My protector." The Volanthi Empire stretched across 40 star systems, and every species in the galaxy knew their name with fear and respect alike. Their insectoid warriors numbered in the billions. Their ships darkened the skies of conquered worlds, and their queens ruled with cold precision that left no room for weakness or sentiment. Princess Dazara stood at the observation window of Neutral Station Corinth, watching the stars spin slowly past the reinforced glass, and she felt nothing but contempt for this place. It was beneath her station, beneath her dignity, and yet here she stood as part of some foolish peace treaty. Her mother had negotiated with 3 lesser species. The council had demanded guarantees. They had demanded observers, and most insultingly of all, they had demanded that each diplomatic representative accept a security detail chosen by the Galactic Peacekeeping Authority. "Your assigned protector has arrived, Your Highness," her attendant announced with a bow of her segmented head. Thasara turned, expecting to see one of the hulking Gorath warriors, or perhaps a squad of mechanical sentinel units. Instead, she found herself looking at a single figure standing in her doorway, a creature of soft flesh and dull eyes, wearing simple black armor that covered a body that seemed almost fragile compared to the warriors she knew. A human security officer, Kang Du-yan. "Reporting for duty, Your Highness," the human said, and he bowed in a way that suggested he had studied Volanthi customs, but had not quite mastered Themthasara's mandibles clicked in what her species used for bitter laughter. And she turned to her attendant with disbelief burning in her compound eyes. "This is my protection?" she demanded. A single human, one of those Death World primitives who only joined the galactic community a century ago. The Yun stood still and said nothing, his face showing no reaction to her words, and Thasara found that small act of composure slightly irritating. Lesser beings usually trembled when she expressed displeasure. "The authority assigned him specifically to your detail," her attendant explained nervously. "Humans are considered acceptable security assets for diplomatic protection. They are inexpensive, and they do not trigger political complications between the major powers." "Inexpensive," Thasara repeated with venom in her voice. "They send me a cheap guard because they see me as unimportant. This is an insult wrapped in diplomatic language. I will keep you safe." "Your Highness," Du-Yun said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made Thasara pause. It was not a promise made to impress her. It was simply a statement of fact, like saying that stars burn or that space is cold. "You will stay out of my way and try not to embarrass me further," Thasara replied coldly, and she swept past him without another glance over the following days. Thasara did her best to ignore the human shadow that followed her through the station. He was always there, always watching, always positioned between her and doorways or crowds. But she refused to acknowledge his presence more than absolutely necessary. What she could not ignore was how seriously he took his assignment. She watched from the corner of her eye as he studied maps of the station, memorizing every corridor and every emergency exit. She noticed how he learned the names and faces of every dignitary, every guard, and every service worker who came near her quarters. She observed how he practiced with his weapons in the early hours when he thought no one was watching, moving with a speed and precision that seemed wrong for such a soft-bodied creature. "Why do you try so hard?" she asked him one evening, the question escaping before she could stop it. "Your superiors clearly sent you here to fail. They gave you an impossible assignment to make the Volanthi look foolish. Surely you understand this." Du-Yun considered her question for a moment before answering. "I do not care what my superiors intended," he said simply. "I was given a duty, and I will fulfill it. That is what I was trained to do. That is what I choose to do. Even though I am not human, even though my empire has never been kind to your species." "You are in my care," Du-Yun replied, and his dark eyes met her compound gaze without flinching. "That is all that matters to me." Nasara did not know how to respond to such simple conviction. So she said nothing and returned to her work, 3 days before the grand reception that would formalize the peace treaty. Do-Yun approached her with concern written across his strange flat face. "Your Highness, I have noticed unusual activity around your quarters," he reported in a low voice. "3 individuals have been observing your movements for the past week. They change positions to avoid detection, but they are always watching you specifically. Not the other diplomats. You think I am being targeted," Nasara said. "And it was not a question. I am certain of it," Do-Yun confirmed. "I have reported my concerns to station security, but they dismissed my observations as paranoia. They say the surveillance systems show nothing unusual. Then perhaps you are being paranoid. Perhaps," Do-Yun acknowledged. "But I have learned to trust my instincts. And my instincts tell me that someone on this station wants you dead. I do not know who hired them or why, but I will find out before they can act." The Zara studied her human protector with new eyes, seeing him not as an insult but as something else entirely. Something she did not yet have a name for very well, she said at last. "Do what you must, but do not cause a diplomatic incident." Do-Yun bowed again, and this time his form was perfect. "I will protect you, Your Highness," he said. "Whatever it takes, I will protect you." And as he turned to leave, Zara felt the first small crack form in the wall of indifference she had built around herself. This strange creature with his soft skin and his iron will had made her a promise, and some part of her wanted to believe that he meant it. She did not yet know that she would see that promise tested in blood and fire before the week was done. The grand reception hall of Neutral Station Corinth blazed with light and color as representatives from a dozen species gathered to celebrate the peace treaty, and Princess Dasara stood among them in ceremonial robes that shimmered like liquid starlight. She hated every moment of it, the forced smiles and empty words, but duty demanded her presence. Do-Yun stood 3 paces behind her, dressed in formal security attire that still allowed him to move freely. His eyes never stopped scanning the crowd, watching every movement and tracking every potential threat. "You look tense," Zara murmured without turning to face him. "I am always tense when I cannot control the environment," Do-Yun replied quietly. "Too many entrances, too many blind spots, too many species I cannot read. This room is a nightmare for protection." Zara almost smiled at his honesty, but the expression died on her face as she saw 3 massive figures enter through the far doors. They were Corvith, reptilian predators who stood nearly 3 meters tall and whose clawed hands could tear through steel plating like paper. The Corvith were not on the guest list. "Do-Yun," she started to say. "I see. Them," he cut in, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. "Your Highness, when I say run, you run toward the service corridor on your left. Do not look back. Do not stop. Do not wait for me. What are you going to do?" "My job." The Corvith moved through the crowd like sharks through water, their yellow eyes fixed on Zara with predatory focus. Other guests scattered away from them, sensing danger, even if they did not understand it. And the station security guards hesitated at the sight of such fearsome creatures. One of the Corvith pulled a plasma blade from beneath his cloak, and the weapon hummed to life with a sound like tearing metal. "The princess dies tonight," the lead Corvith announced in a voice that rumbled like thunder. "Payment has been received, and the consortium sends their regards." Zara felt cold fear grip her hearts, and she understood now that Do-Yun had been right all along. Someone wanted her dead badly enough to hire the most dangerous killers in the sector. "Run," Do-Yun said, and he mothered Zara had never seen anything move so fast. One moment the human was standing beside her, and the next he was between her and the Corvith, his own blade drawn and his body positioned like a living shield. "Go now!" he shouted, and his voice cracked like a whip. She ran behind her. She heard the clash of weapons and the roar of the Corvith as they engaged her protector, and every instinct told her to keep running, to escape, to survive. But something made her stop at the entrance to the service corridor and look back. What she saw changed everything she thought she knew about Humanstoyan fought 3 Corvith assassins alone. And he was winning. He moved like water and struck like lightning, ducking under claws that would have torn him in half and slashing at joints and tendons with surgical precision. He was smaller than his enemies, weaker than them in raw strength. But he used that to his advantage, slipping through their guards and turning their own power against them. The first Corvith fell when Du Yun drove his blade up through the soft scales under its jaw, and the creature collapsed with a gurgling scream. The second died when the human grabbed its arm mid-swing and used its own momentum to throw it into a support pillar, stunning it long enough for Du Yun to retrieve the dead assassin's plasma blade and drive it through the creature's skull. The third Corvith was the largest and the fastest, and it landed a terrible blow that sent Du Yun crashing into a table. The Zara heard bones crack, saw blood spray from the human's mouth, and she thought for certain that her protector was finished. But Du Yun rose again. He rose with blood streaming down his face and his arm hanging at a wrong angle, and he raised his blade in his remaining good hand. "You should have brought more," he said to the Corvith, and his voice was steady despite the pain that must have been screaming through his body. The assassin charged, and Du Yun sidestepped at the last possible moment, letting the creature's charge carry it past him. As it passed, the human spun and drove his blade into the back of the Corvith's knee, crippling it. The assassin fell with a howl of rage and pain, and Du Yun stood over it with his weapon pointed at its throat. "Who hired you?" the human demanded. The Corvith spat blood and laughed. "You think this ends here, human? The consortium will send 100 more. They will never stop until the princess is dead and the peace treaty lies in ashes." Du Yun said nothing more. He simply ended the creature with a single clean strike. Then he turned, and his eyes found the Zara standing frozen at the corridor entrance. He walked toward her with unsteady steps, leaving a trail of blood behind him, and when he reached her, he did the most incredible thing she had ever witnessed. He bowed. "Are you hurt, Your Highness?" he asked, and his voice was barely more than a whisper. Thesser stared at this broken, bleeding creature who had just killed 3 of the galaxy's deadliest predators to keep her safe, and she felt something shift inside her chest. Something that her species did not have words for. "You are dying," she said, and her voice trembled in a way it never had before. "I am not dying," Du Yun replied. And somehow he managed to smile. "I have had worse than this. I just need a moment to catch my breath." He collapsed into her arms before he could say another word. Station security finally arrived, far too late to matter, and they found the Volanti princess kneeling on the floor, holding an unconscious human in her arms and refusing to let anyone else touch him. "This man saved my life," she told them, and there was steel in her voice that made even the armored guards step back. "You will take him to your best medical facility. You will give him the finest care available, and you will pray to whatever gods you worship that he survives. If he dies, I will hold this station responsible, and my mother's fleet will reduce this place to atoms." No one argued with her as they carried Du Yun away. The Zara watched him go, and she made herself a promise. This human had bled for her, had nearly died for her, and she would not forget that debt. She would never forget. The medical bay smelled of antiseptic and healing gels, and Princess Zara had grown familiar with that smell over the past 6 days. She visited Du Yun every morning and every evening, ignoring the shocked looks of her attendants and the whispered gossip that spread through the station. Like wildfire, Volanti royalty did not visit wounded servants. They did not sit beside their beds and watch them breathe. and they certainly did not speak with them as equals. But Dazara had stopped caring what tradition demanded the moment she saw a human stand alone against three, Corvus and Wynn. "You should not be here, Your Highness," Du Yun said on the seventh day, when he finally woke and found her sitting in the chair beside his bed. "It is not proper. Nothing about this situation is proper," Dazara replied, and she allowed herself a small smile. A princess being saved by a single human. That human killing three Corvus warriors without backup. And now that same princess refusing to leave his side. The gossip channels have been calling it the scandal of the decade. Du Yun tried to sit up and winced as his broken ribs protested the movement. "How long was I unconscious?" 7 days, the doctor said. "You should have died 3 times over." They do not understand how humans can survive such trauma. They kept saying your species was not supposed to be this resilient. Humans are difficult to kill, Du Yun said simply. "We evolved on a world that tried to destroy us every day. Surviving is what we do best." Dazara leaned forward, her compound eyes studying his face with an intensity that made most beings uncomfortable. Du Yun met her gaze without flinching, just as he had done from the first moment they met. "Why did you do it?" she asked, and her voice was softer than she had ever allowed it to be. "You could have run with me. You could have called for backup. You could have done anything except throw yourself at 3 creatures who should have torn you apart. Why did you fight?" Du Yun was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. "Because you were in danger," he said at last, "because that is what protectors do. We do not calculate odds or weigh our own survival against our duty. We simply act. That is illogical," Dazara said. But there was no criticism in her voice. "The Volanthi believe in acceptable losses. We understand that sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good. What you did was not a calculated sacrifice. It was something else entirely. Humans have a word for it," Du Yun replied. "We call it devotion." Dazara turned the word over in her mind, examining it from every angle like a strange and precious gem. Her species had no equivalent concept, no term for the kind of fierce and unconditional loyalty that Du Yun had demonstrated. "Your devotion nearly killed you, but it did not, and you are alive. That is all that matters to me." The princess fell silent again, and in that silence something passed between them. An understanding that went beyond words or species or the vast gulf of evolution that separated their kinds over the following weeks. As Du Yun recovered with a speed that continued to astonish the Volanthi doctors, Dazara found herself spending more and more time in his company. She told herself it was merely practical, that she needed to understand her protector's methods and mindset. But deep down she knew the truth was something more complicated. She enjoyed talking to him. Du Yun told her about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests and endless diversity of life that had shaped humanity into what they were. He spoke of wars and peace, of great heroes and terrible villains, of art and music, and the countless ways that humans had learned to express the fire that burned inside them in return. Dazara told him about the Volanthi Empire, about the hive minds and the queens and the ancient traditions that governed every aspect of her people's lives. She admitted things she had never spoken aloud before. Doubts about her role and questions about the cold logic that her mother's empire was built upon. "I used to think your species was primitive," she confessed one evening. "I thought you were nothing more than aggressive animals who had stumbled into space through luck rather than skill. I was wrong. I was very wrong. Most species make that mistake," Du Yun said without bitterness. "They see our soft bodies and our short lifespans, and they assume we are weak. They do not understand that our weakness is also our strength. How can weakness be strength? Because we know we are fragile. We fight harder than anyone else to protect what we love. We do not take survival for granted. so we value every moment and every connection more fiercely than species who live for centuries. The Zara considered his words carefully, and she felt another piece of her old worldview crumble away on the day that Du Yun was finally released for medical care. A message arrived from the Dreth Consortium. It was delivered through unofficial channels, untraceable and encrypted. But its meaning was brutally clear: surrender the princess or the station will burn. The message read, "This was your first warning, and it will be your last." Du Yun read the message with cold eyes. And when he looked up at the Zara, she saw something in his expression that she had not seen before. It was not fear or anger, but something harder and more dangerous. "We should contact your mother," he said. "Request evacuation and military support. My empire has advised me to return home immediately." The Zara replied, "But I will not run from these cowards. The peace treaty is too important, and if I flee now, everything we have worked for will collapse. Then we stand and fight." The Zara looked at her human protector, at this small and fragile creature who had already nearly died for her once, and she felt something that might have been fear or might have been hope. "You would stay with me?" she asked, "even knowing what is coming?" Du Yun smiled, and in that smile she saw the fierce and burning heart that made humans so terrifying to those who underestimated them. "I made you a promise, Your Highness," he said, "and I intend to keep it. I will protect you from the Consortium, from their armies, from the entire galaxy, if I must. That is my duty, and I will not abandon it. Even if it kills you?" Even then, the Zara reached out and touched his hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. And she made her own silent promise in return. This human had given her everything, and she would not let his sacrifice be in vain. The Consortium fleet arrived 3 days later, 12 warships emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation, and their weapons powered up before the station's sensors could even complete their scan. The message they broadcast was simple and final: surrender the Volanti princess or be destroyed. There will be no further negotiations. Station Commander Felix, a nervous bureaucrat who had never seen real combat, immediately ordered all personnel to prepare for evacuation. But Du Yun had other plans. "We have 47 human security officers on this station," he told the commander in a briefing room filled with panicking officials. "Give us control of the defense grid and access to the armory, and we will hold them off until reinforcements arrive." "Hold them off?" Felix sputtered. "Against 12 warships and over 2,000 ground troops? That is suicide." "Maybe," Du Yun acknowledged, "but it is also the only chance we have. If we evacuate now, their fighters will pick off our escape pods one by one, and everyone on this station will die anyway. Our only hope is to make them bleed for every corridor until help arrives. And who is coming to help us?" "I sent a message to the Volanti Imperial Fleet 6 hours ago," Princess Thesara said, stepping forward with authority that silenced every voice in the room. "My mother's armada is already on its way, but they need time to reach us. Officer Kang is right. We must fight." Felix looked at the princess, then at the human who stood beside her like a living weapon, and he saw that arguing was pointless. "Very well," he said weakly. "The station is yours, human. Try not to get us all killed." Du Yun wasted no time. Within the hour, he had organized the human security officers into defensive teams and begun transforming the station into a death trap for any invaders foolish enough to board. They rigged corridors with explosives, set up ambush points in maintenance tunnels, sealed blast doors to create kill zones, and distributed weapons to every civilian willing to fight. Du Yun moved through the preparations like a general commanding an army, and the Zara watched with growing amazement as order emerged from chaos. "Your people are remarkable," she told him as the first Consortium landing craft attached to the station's outer hull. "We are survivors," Du Yun replied. checking his weapon one final time. "That is all. Now stay behind me and do exactly as I say." The first wave of consortium troops breached the outer airlocks, expecting minimal resistance. Instead, they found a corridor filled with smoke and fire, and humans who emerged from the shadows like vengeful ghosts. Battle for Neutral Station Corinth had begun. Doyun fought at the front of every engagement, leading his teams through brutal close-quarters combat that turned pristine white corridors into blood-soaked battlegrounds. The consortium soldiers were well-trained and well-equipped, but they had never faced anything like human defenders who refused to retreat, who kept fighting even when wounded, who turned every room into a killing field. "They just keep coming." A consortium officer screamed into his communicator before a human blade silenced him forever. "Fall back to the secondary positions." Another shouted, only to find that the humans had already rigged those positions with explosives hour after hour. The invaders pushed deeper into the station, and hour after hour they paid for every meter with rivers of blood. They had expected to overwhelm the defenders in minutes, but the minutes stretched into hours, and the hours stretched into a nightmare that seemed to have no end through it all. Do-hyun stayed at the Sara's side, guiding her through collapsing corridors and debris-filled passageways, shielding her with his own body when enemy fire came too close, and eliminating any threat that got within striking distance. "There are too many of them," the Sara said as they sheltered behind an overturned security console, listening to the sounds of battle echoing from every direction. "There are never too many," Do-hyun replied, reloading his weapon with hands that did not tremble. "Only too few of us who are willing to stand and fight. But we are still standing, and that is what matters." A consortium soldier burst through a nearby doorway, and Do-hyun killed him before the Sara could even register the movement. He stepped over the body and kept moving, pulling her along with gentle but insistent pressure. "Stay close," he said. "We are almost to the secure chamber." They passed through corridors filled with the dead and dying, and the Sara saw things that would haunt her dreams for years to come. She saw humans fighting with wounds that should have killed them, refusing to fall until their enemies fell first. She saw them protecting each other with a ferocity that bordered on madness, throwing themselves into danger without hesitation. She understood now why the galaxy feared humanity. They reached the secure chamber just as a consortium commander and his squad cut off their escape route. The commander was massive, armored from head to toe, and he looked at Do-hyun with contempt. "One human between us and our target." The commander laughed. "Step aside, little creature, and I will kill you quickly." Do-hyun raised his blade and smiled. "I have been killing your soldiers all day," he said. "You are just one more." The fight was brutal and short. The commander was stronger, but Do-hyun was faster and more vicious. And when it was over, the commander lay dead at his feet alongside every member of his squad. But the victory came at a cost. Do-hyun collapsed against the wall, blood pouring from a wound in his side that had cut deep through his armor. The Sara caught him before he could fall and pressed her hands against the injury, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. "You need medical attention," she said, fear cracking her voice. "I need to protect you," Do-hyun replied, and he forced himself to stand again. "The fight is not over yet." But even as he spoke, new sounds echoed through the station. Not the chaos of battle, but the coordinated thunder of heavy weapons fire and the screaming of consortium soldiers caught in unexpected assault. "What is happening?" The Zara Do-hyun looked at his communicator and smiled through the pain. "Your mother's fleet has arrived," he said. "The Volanthi are here, and for the first time since the siege began, Princess Thesara allowed herself to hope that they might actually survive." The Volanthi Imperial fleet swept through the consortium warships like a blade through silk, and within 2 hours, the enemy armada was nothing but expanding clouds of debris drifting through the cold darkness of space. Queen Velethsara had brought 30 warships and 10,000 warriors, and she had used them without mercy now. She walked through the ruined corridors of Neutral Station Corinth, surrounded by her royal guard, and what she saw made even her ancient hearts grow heavy with shock bodies lay everywhere. Consortium soldiers and station defenders alike, and the walls were scorched with weapons fire and painted with blood. This had not been a battle, but a slaughter, and someone had made the invaders pay dearly for every step they had taken. "Find my daughter," the queen commanded, and her voice echoed through the devastation like thunder. Her guards spread out through the station, searching room by room, and the queen followed behind them with growing dread. She had expected to find the Tsar dead or captured, another victim of the consortium's endless hunger for power and chaos. What she found instead stopped her in her tracks. The main reception hall had been transformed into a fortress. Overturned tables formed barricades. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across improvised defensive positions. And in the center of it all stood her daughter, alive and unharmed, but the Tsar was not alone in front of her. Still holding a blood-stained blade despite the terrible wounds that covered his body, stood a human. He was barely upright, swaying on his feet like a tree in a storm. But his eyes were fixed on the queen and her guards with fierce determination. "Stand down," the lead guard commanded. "You are in the presence of Queen Velethsara of the Volanthi Empire." The human did not move, did not lower his weapon, did not take his eyes off the armed warriors surrounding him. "Duyun, it is over," the Tsar said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "These are my mother's soldiers. They are here to help us." Only then did the tension drain from the human's body. Only then did he lower his blade and step aside, revealing the princess to her mother's gaze. Queen Velethsara walked forward slowly, her compound eyes taking in every detail of the scene before her. She saw the bodies of consortium soldiers scattered around the room, saw the blood that covered her daughter's robes, saw the human who had placed himself between her child and every threat. She stopped in front of Duyun and studied him with the cold evaluation of a ruler who would live for centuries and seen countless warriors come and go. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Security Officer Kang Duyun, Your Majesty," he replied, and his voice was steady despite his obvious pain. "Assigned to protect Princess the Tsar by the Galactic Peacekeeping Authority." "One human," the queen said slowly. "They sent one human to protect my daughter." "Yes, Your Majesty." Velethsara looked at the carnage around her, at the impossible evidence of what this single human had done, and she felt something she had not experienced in a very long time. She felt surprised. "The survivors tell me that you killed 3 Corvid assassins before the siege began," she said. "They tell me that you organized the station's defense and held off 2,000 consortium soldiers for nearly 12 hours with fewer than 50 defenders. They tell me that you personally killed over 30 enemy warriors and refused to fall, no matter how badly you were wounded. I did my duty." "Your Majesty, your duty," the queen repeated, and there was something strange in her voice, something that might have been wonder. "The consortium offered a bounty of 10 million credits for my daughter's head. They sent their best killers, their finest soldiers, an entire fleet to destroy her, and yet here she stands, protected by one human who was assigned to her as an afterthought." She turned to her daughter, and for the first time, the Tsar saw uncertainty in her mother's ancient eyes. "Who guards you so fiercely, daughter?" Queen Velethsara demanded. "Who is this creature who would stand against an army for you? Who would die before letting harm come to you? Who fights with the fury of a species that the galaxy has dismissed as primitive and weak?" The Tsar stepped forward and took Duyun's hand in her own, a gesture that made her mother's eyes widen with shock. No Volanthi princess had ever touched a servant so openly, so tenderly, so deliberately. "My protector," she answered. And her voice rang clear and strong through the ruined hall. "His name is Kang Du-yun, and he is worth more than any treasure in your empire." The queen was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. The cold authority was still there, but underneath, it was something warmer. Something almost like respect. "I have ruled the Volanti Empire for 400 years, she said. "I have commanded armies that numbered in the millions. I have destroyed civilizations and built new ones in their place. I have seen warriors of every species fight and die in battles beyond counting. But I have never seen anything like what this human has done." She turned to face Du-yun directly, and she inclined her head in the smallest of bows. "You have my gratitude, Kang Du-yun of Earth. You have saved the life of my daughter and the honor of my house, and the Volanti do not forget such debts. I did only what any human would do." "Your Majesty," Du-yun replied, "I protected someone in my care. There is no debt, only duty fulfilled." "No," the queen said firmly. "What you call duty, we call devotion, and devotion of this magnitude cannot go unrewarded. From this day forward, you shall serve as my daughter's permanent protector, bound to her by royal decree, and any who question this arrangement will answer to me personally." Du-yun looked at the Tsara, and she saw the question in his eyes. He would not accept unless she wanted him to. "Will you stay with me?" she asked him quietly. "Not because you are ordered to, but because you choose to?" "I will stay," he answered, and his smile was tired but genuine. "For as long as you will have me." As the royal entourage prepared to leave the station, as medics finally tended to Du-yun's wounds over his protests, the Tsara walked beside her mother and asked a question that had been burning in her mind. "Mother, what do humans call someone who would die for another without hesitation?" The queen considered the question carefully before responding. "I do not know the human words," she admitted, "but I believe it is connected to their concept of family. Humans do not require blood ties to form such bonds. They create them through shared struggle and sacrifice." The Tsara nodded slowly, understanding at last what Du-yun had given her. Not just protection, but something far more precious. She had gained a protector, a guardian, and in the strange and beautiful way of humans, something very close to family. When she returned to Du-yun's side and took his hand again, she saw recognition in his eyes. He understood what she was offering, what she was asking. "Family?" she said softly, testing the word on her tongue in Du-yun. The human who had defied an army for her, who had bled and nearly died to keep her safe, who had shown her what devotion truly meant, smiled and answered with a single word that changed everything: family.